your documentary is very touching. I feel like even for someone that maybe hasn't put too much input on this sort of story, because most of us have been lucky on not having to, it touches a heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So much to cover, but first I want to congratulate you for the recognition that your documentary has received with the Academy. Um, one of you can tell me how does it feel at this moment?
It feels, it feels surreal. I think it's, we started working on this film, I think at the beginning of 2022, so it's been sort of in our life for a long time, and we were filming for a long time. We were emotionally invested in the making of it, and then we were editing for about 18 months as well. So we've really been with it for such a long time, and it just feels we premiered in February 2024, and then there was a little bit of a lull. So you never, in terms of the film festival, so you never really know how it's going to be received, sort of beyond that. And then over the last couple of months, towards the end of last year, we were able to get some film festivals and win some awards. And one thing has led to another, and we're just so thankful to everyone, to the Academy for the acknowledgement, to all our supporters, to our collaborators. It really is a team effort, to make any sort of work. So, we're thrilled.
I think to me, I'm not going to lie that it's an absolute thrill, to have this kind of recognition, by our, you know, especially, by the Academy, like our peers, like very esteemed group of people. But I think um, it was really the reaction of Aaron after seeing the film that will stay with me for the rest of my life. That was the one kind of reaction I was like holding my breath for, and he loves the film and really, stands behind it, and felt honestly, he told us that like watching it and having watch it now a few times, it really felt, healing for him to have participated, in telling a story. And that is like the highest praise and the highest honor you could possibly imagine.
I'm going to skip all my questions I had planned now and ask you about Aaron since you're bringing him up. Um, I was surprised to his reaction. I expected a different reaction, maybe celebrating, because that's what seemed like he wanted. Like that seemed to be what he thought I would be. That's how he would find his closure. But yet it was the total opposite.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel that? I mean, you witnessed it.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it had something to do with John's words?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, I can't speak for Aaron and say exactly what made him uh change his mind like that, but yeah, I think in a way, if I were to guess, I would say that John had been this person who almost was, and for absolutely understandable reasons, was like this looming figure, this villain, in Aaron's life, this person who took so much from him, and caused so much trauma and so much destruction in his own life. And I think that it was the combination of Aaron not feeling the relief or the closure, I think when he heard that John was executed, as you can see in the film, like I don't think he got the feeling that he thought he would, and I would guess that also just hearing John speak, on his deathbed, literally, and maybe admit that his own family, his son, he says, this really powerful line in that message. John says, my son was my victim too, and knowing that now there's going to be another child out there without a father, I think maybe that might have really sunk in for Aaron in that moment. And he made a decision, to accept his apology rather than kind of continue another sort of cycle of hate and pain.
Yeah, I feel like Aaron got the worst part because like he relived the loss of his father the moment that John was executed.
Yeah.
and then after receiving that voicemail.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, Aaron has had, he's had for his entire adult life has been defined, by this like absolutely heinous, horrible act. And I can't even imagine, honestly. I think, a lot of us play this intellectual game, right? Like, are you for capital punishment or against capital punishment? What if it was someone you loved, And Aaron has had to live that his whole life. And the fact that he can come out of it to a place of forgiveness and empathy just speaks so much about, his heart. And I think is a lesson to all of us, about what grievances we're holding on to, what kind of stuff we're holding on to, and why we are and why we don't, why we can't let things go. And I learned so much from him, honestly. And, I hope that the reaction that he's getting, and the fact that people admire him so much, after seeing this film, um, gives him that purpose.
And there was a part where he said, it's not my job to judge him, it's God's. But I feel in a way he had been this entire time. I mean, when he said he sent out the most wanted name, I feel that that was some sort of judgment. I feel like the statement, here I am trying to play detective, but kind of like some sort of guilt.
Do you mean like guilt on whose part? Like on Aaron's part?
Maybe from Aaron, yes, seeking and pushing for him to get the death, for John to get the death
Oh,
penalty, and making that statement at the end saying that it's not his job to judge, that it's God.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whether Aaron felt any kind of guilt for wanting, I think, you know, I think Aaron's so conflicted. Even, even now, when I met him and I think this is sort of this is what I really take away from it as well. It's like, even though sort of what's what happened, sort of Aaron lost his father and he's been caught up in this, for his entire life, and it's really defined his entire life. And he actually, became estranged from his family sort of as well. And like there's been sort of a bit of a rift there too. So it's really had an impact on every aspect of his life. And I think even now and even after the execution, I think it's really only been the making of this film that's actually been able to be a little like bring a little bit of peace to him, because he's been able to not necessarily relive it, but he's been able to sort of step outside of himself and reflect back on what's happened. And he's had sort of an incredible sort of supporter in Smriti as well. Like, he would call Smriti many, many times for hours, and they would just be able to sort of to talk through sort of what happened to him, and sort of, and also like throughout his entire past and history as well. So I think in terms of your question, I think whatever sort of feeling or emotion that he might have been having, I would say yes, he has, because I think he's had the full gamut, because he's really gone through, he's really gone between sort of whether it's, feeling guilty for wanting it, or, for wanting it, or whether it's sort of wanting it so desperately for, for his own pain to maybe end, So I think it's a really broad spectrum. And, when we talk about, Izzy is, John's victim, I think, Aaron is too, of course, and I think there's pain everywhere.
I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to go backwards. How did you guys originally find out about this story that made you want to document it?
So essentially, Keri Blakinger is a reporter who was based in Texas at the time. She was writing for the Marshall Project. She covers sort of death row a lot. She covers the prison system. She writes in a beautiful way. And Smriti had found her work. Smriti had wanted to do something around sort of like death row within Texas for a while. And I think finding Keri's writing that brought so much humanity, especially to the prisoners, was a really amazing sort of access point for us. And it's through Keri's writing that we came across John's story as well. And, when we asked Keri, could we meet John? Could we reach out to John about making a documentary? He said yes. And it is through that, it was actually really, it was a real gift because when you're interviewing someone on death row, you only really have access to them once every six months. So we were producing a short film, our production schedule sort of is usually sort of, shorter than that of a feature. So it meant that we had very limited time with John, and only 3 people are allowed to go inside the prison. So it was our DP, it was Smriti, and it was Keri. So our DP was able to set up that sort of that beautiful shot, and then between sort of Keri was asking sort of especially at the beginning sort of most of the questions so that John would feel comfortable, and that relationship was already there, but also with Smriti by her side also guiding the interview, we were able to really sort of to get to build a film sort of in the very short amount of time that we had.
Did you by any chance trying to reach John's mother?
We did try. We tried to connect with everyone in his family, but as you can imagine, it's complicated, and we you kind of see who was responsive.
The childhood that he had
Yeah.
is heartbreaking. And just to think that there are so many kids that live like this. What do you think this film is gonna, how do you think the family will react to this film or has reacted? Have you gotten any reactions
From whose family do you think?
from John's family?
Oh, it's weird to say they love it. I know that's so strange, but from John's, everyone that in John's life that we were in touch with, his closest friends, uh, Jan, his son, his pastor, has seen the film and really responded positively to it, and really felt that it was a very moving testament, an accurate testament of his life and his legacy. And actually, as of yesterday, the film is now available to um, oh, I think almost 1 million prisoners across the US and 40 plus states, including um, the uh, the prisoners in the Pulitsky unit, the death row unit where John lived. And there are people there who knew him for many, many years. So, they have access to the film now, so they'll be able to see it. And I just know from a little bit of early feedback we've gotten that people, even in that community, like who are usually pretty wary about death row films and things like that, because the way that, death row and death row prisoners are portrayed actually really have been moved by the film and really loved it.
I felt for Jan Trujillo, the godmother. I was crying when she was crying in your documentary. It must have been heartbreaking. I feel like she was like crying for her own son. Um, and that's when I thought about John's mother.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think Jan was the surrogate, right? Like John, I think didn't for many years has not had a relationship with his mother. Um, so it's hard for me to say, we never had an opportunity to meet her or talk to her or, um, anything like that. So it's hard for me to say what was going through her mind, or anyone else in his immediate family, what going through their mind. Um, Jan, I think for John or for anybody, right, who dies, and especially if you're on, in long-term incarceration or death row, people fall away from your life. Like this is a very common thing. It's like you lose people, right? The visits stop, like just people distance themselves, or disappear from your life. There's a very common. And in fact, one of the things when, Jan would visit John would tell her, like, bring more people from the church, because Jan would ask, and people would frequently ask John, like, what do people need the men on death row need? What do they need? And you would expect, them to say, like, well, they need, commissary, or they need this or that or whatever, lawyers, et cetera. And he's like, they need visits. Like, we need visits because that's the only time they are in solitary, for most of their lives. And the only time they get to really interact with anybody else is somebody comes visits them. And it's really difficult to find people who will do what Jan did, was every month for, you know, 16, 18 years, I can't remember now, since 2011, she would go and visit him. And so he would encourage her to bring other members, of her church and people to visit some of the other inmates. And but I think for the other thing is that, who is going to grieve for you when you're gone? Who's going to, and a lot of the men on the row, like, you saw, I don't know if you remember there was a montage earlier in the film of the prison cemetery in Huntsville with these unmarked graves, like that was John's worst nightmare, was just being, because if you don't have anybody who can like take your body and take custody of your body and give you a proper burial, that's where you go. All of your worldly belongings are put in essentially two trash bags. They're either thrown out, or you have 48 hours, or the whatever it is, the family has just a certain amount of time to collect those items, otherwise they're thrown out. And if you don't have anyone to or if your family doesn't have the means to give you a proper burial, you go in this unmarked grave, next to the cemetery. And that was really John's worst nightmare. And that he had Jan to not only grieve for him, but to give him, a proper burial and really hold his memory, keep his memory alive for Izzy, was really significant. And I think John was not lucky in much of his life, but I think that was one thing that he had that, um, that was really lucky.
Yeah. How's Izzy? Did he, I imagine he already watched the film?
Yeah, he has. And it was also, that was also sort of a hard thing, sort of to make sure that he watched the film, but he watched it with his parents. And it was obviously a lot to see yourself on screen, but he has done some documentaries sort of before, so it wasn't the first time. He was sort of going in prepared. Um, and he's doing really well. He's still in school. He's got a job now as well after school, so he's keeping busy. But yeah, he's good. Growing up.
Now, I know the purpose of going into this, from what I read, was to cover the capacity of forgiveness. What would you say you learned from that after making the documentary?
It just taught me so much about the way that any of us hold on to grievances, big or small, and I think I think a lot about about how if Aaron could find it in his heart, to forgive John, and to accept his apology and try to close that chapter, then, you know, then in uh, what like why am I holding on to any kind of grievance, So I think it's a powerful thing. It's a really powerful thing. And I think ultimately that may be, again, not wanting to speak for Aaron, but like I think that may be what liberated him more than this sort of promise of justice did.
I'm gonna stick with what Smithy said.
It was very touching. As for me, when I first heard about the documentary, I've always been kind of against the death penalty. Even for me, I've always thought, what better torture than to keep someone in jail, confinement for 23 hours a day, every day of their life, versus to being liberated from it like it happened with John.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonder if maybe this will open that conversation as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope so. Humans are complicated, and hopefully that this film can show people that, we can't just assume what's in someone's heart, or, look at things as black and white.
And also maybe not as eye to eye. You killed.
Yeah.
You killed.
Yeah. 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 It's so much more complicated than that.
Plus, I think it's cheaper just to maintain someone in jail for life
It is.
than doing all this, going back and forth.
Yeah.
for execution.
That is, death row is very expensive. Very, very expensive.
Yeah. So people think about it. Your tax money. I'm just saying, in Texas.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations again. Thank you for speaking to me. I look forward to speaking with you and hearing your thoughts and your experience and filming this documentary.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you. I apologize. Thank you. And thank you for also, while sick, making the time.
Yeah, no, of course, of course. Feel better. Keep drinking that tea.
Will do. Thank you so much. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.